Welcome back to the CryptoBot channel, everyone. My name is Josh, and right now, Bitcoin is playing out this bearish divergence while the Bitcoin ETF inflows are slowing down. But on top of that, the price is running into critical short-term support as a Bitcoin whale is just about to buy a lot of Bitcoin, which I'll talk about in just a moment, alongside Ethereum, which is also flashing a new bearish signal on the daily time frame and running into critical short-term support. So I'll be talking about all of that and more later in the video, so definitely watch to the end. First of all, we need to take a look at the Bitcoin ETF news today, because just over the last one day, we actually saw a very small inflow compared to previous days over the last few weeks. Because even just over the last few days, we saw inflows like 600 million or even $1 billion. We saw one day this week where we had a net inflow into the Bitcoin ETFs over $1 billion US. But instead, what we saw yesterday was a net inflow of only 132 million US, which for this is honestly not very big. And now, with that being said, due to BlackRock, it was still a net inflow rather than a net outflow, because BlackRock, or IBIT, accumulated around $345 million worth of Bitcoin just yesterday. But yesterday, we saw the smallest ever inflow into the Fidelity Bitcoin ETF of only $13.7 million US. That was Fidelity's worst day yet for inflows into their Bitcoin ETF. And for comparison, over the last few days, we've seen inflows into the Fidelity ETF of 1 to 2 to even 300 million, and their largest inflow is close to 500 million in one day. And so once again, just yesterday, they only had an inflow of around 13.7 million, which is honestly nothing for Fidelity. And at the same time, of course, we saw yet another outflow from Grayscale, which is usual. We saw another approximately $250 million worth of Bitcoin dumped on the market thanks to Grayscale, which is their usual outflows basically every single weekday. And so when we add up all of this, when we're adding up all of the inflows and subtracting the Grayscale outflow, we're left with a net inflow at the end of the day of around 132.7 million US. And as I've been saying here on the channel, if we're seeing significant net inflows into the Bitcoin ETFs, I'm talking $400 to $500 million each day, if not more, then under those circumstances, it's going to be very hard to see any significant pullback in the price of Bitcoin. We're basically going to head a lot higher if we're seeing, say, $500 million coming into Bitcoin ETFs each day. But as I've also been saying, if we see the inflows stop or actually slow down significantly, that is where we could potentially see a bit more of a pullback in the price of Bitcoin if we're not seeing as much inflows coming into the Bitcoin ETFs, which is exactly what happened yesterday. And so once again, just yesterday, we saw a relatively small inflow for the spot Bitcoin ETFs, which allowed the price of Bitcoin to have that pullback that it perhaps would have had earlier if it weren't for the massive inflows that we've seen over the last few weeks. And so as always, I'll make sure to keep you up to date on what's happening here in the Bitcoin ETFs, because this is definitely important information to pay attention to, because these definitely have a major effect on the price of Bitcoin. But right now, with the spot Bitcoin ETF inflows actually slowing down, we could potentially see a lot more buying pressure coming up soon due to one massive Bitcoin whale, which is none other than MicroStrategy, also known as Michael Saylor. Essentially, is one of the main guys at MicroStrategy. And just recently, Michael Saylor announced that MicroStrategy will be selling around $500 million US worth of convertible senior notes, which essentially means MicroStrategy will be borrowing around $500 million US from investors. And if we're looking at the interest rate that MicroStrategy will be borrowing that money at, MicroStrategy will be borrowing around $525 million US at an interest rate of 0.875%. That is right, they are borrowing over $500 million US at an interest rate of less than 1%. And so at this point, it's essentially free money that they're borrowing. They're paying almost no interest on this $500 million that they're about to borrow. And this doesn't come due until 2031. So they still have a long time to actually pay this back.
And as Michael Saylor himself has said many times in the past, any of these sort of things that are happening with MicroStrategy, where they're basically either selling stock or selling convertible notes or things like that, essentially with a lot of the proceeds from these sales, like for example borrowing this $500 million, most of that, if not all of that, will likely go into buying Bitcoin, thanks to Michael Saylor basically managing MicroStrategy. And so basically coming very soon, possibly over the next few days, we could end up seeing a lot more buying pressure from MicroStrategy thanks to their new $500 million selling of convertible notes. And once again, that is likely going to go into buying Bitcoin. And so that could perhaps support the price in the short term, in this short-term pullback, while the ETF inflows are slowing down. And remember, over the weekend, we do not have any inflows or outflows from the ETFs because they do not trade over the weekend. And now, with all of that being said, getting into the Bitcoin chart, this is on the weekly time frame, and right now, the price of Bitcoin is basically trading right around the old all-time high. Obviously, we've pulled back a little bit in the short term from the actual all-time high as of right now. But obviously, despite what happens in the shorter term on smaller time frames, if we're looking at the larger time frame here on the weekly time frame, we're clearly still within a larger bullish trend, forming significant higher lows and higher highs. And so as always, it is important to understand the difference between the different time frames, because for example, on a smaller time frame in the short term, we could be looking more bearish, but on a larger time frame, we're still looking very bullish in terms of the larger trend at play. And it's also worth mentioning for anyone that's new to all of this that during a bullish trend, we can see short-term bearish price action here and there, and that's actually very normal to see even during a bullish trend. And if we're taking a look at this daily Bitcoin chart, as of right now, we're still trending in the bullish direction, but obviously in the somewhat shorter term, we have looked a little bit more bearish just on the smaller time frames, for example. And if we're looking at the DXY on the same time frame, I explained yesterday, I gave you a warning that this is a warning signal for Bitcoin because we're actually bouncing back to the upside in the DXY, just in the short term at least. So as of right now, we have not broken the actual downtrend. Technically, it's still forming lower highs and lower lows, which is bullish for the trend for Bitcoin on the daily time frame. But if we're looking at the price action during the bullish trend, obviously that's made up of bearish and bullish price action, but there's more bullish price action than bearish price action in a bullish trend. And we're simply at the point in this bullish trend where we're seeing some short-term bearish price action, which once again was also notified to us thanks to this DXY bouncing back to the upside, as I warned in my last video. And if we're zooming further into the short term, looking at the 8-hour time frame, as of right now, and as I said over the last few days, we have this short-term bearish divergence on the 8-hour time frame with higher highs confirmed in the price and lower highs confirmed in the Bitcoin RSI. And so once again, like I said over the last couple of days, this is telling us that we're losing bullish momentum in the short term, and we're due to see either choppy sideways price action, if not a short-term pullback, as the most likely outcomes from a bearish divergence. Because if we're looking at the last two examples of a bearish divergence on the 8-hour time frame, we saw one right here between these two highs, and that resulted in a short-term pullback in the price, around a 10% pullback before continuing higher later on. And before that, we saw another bearish divergence all the way back here, which resulted in a sideways consolidation in the price of Bitcoin before continuing the larger bullish trend higher later on. And so once again, these short-term bearish divergences can occur during the larger bullish trend, because they essentially mean we're just taking a bit of a short-term pause or setback from the bullish trend, but not necessarily the end of the trend. And so ultimately, what I'm saying today is pretty much the same thing that I've been saying for weeks now, where essentially if we're seeing significant inflows into the Bitcoin ETFs, expect more bullish price action, and it's going to be hard to see any significant pullback in the price if we're seeing significant inflows into the Bitcoin ETFs. But as I've also been saying over the last few weeks, if the inflow starts slowing down, that is where we could potentially see a bit more of a pullback, or potentially over a weekend, for example, when the Bitcoin ETFs are not trading. And now, just before getting into some other important Bitcoin charts today, first, if you actually want to trade these moves in the price of Bitcoin or any other crypto, whether we're bullish or bearish, you can make money with long positions or short positions. And personally, I take trades just like that over on Bybit, so I'll make sure to leave a link to Bybit in the description down below and in the pinned comment. And also, if you use that link down below this video to make a Bybit account and deposit on that account, you can get up to a $30,000 deposit bonus, but only if you use that link down below this video. And also, if you use that link, it will take you to this page right here where you can claim an exclusive 200 USDT airdrop position. And so if you're going to be trading crypto anyway, you might as well check this out. Once again, first link down below this video if you want to claim this free airdrop, or if you want to get up to a $30,000 deposit bonus. But for whatever reason, if you cannot access Bybit or if you cannot KYC on Bybit, there is also Bitflex, which is another crypto exchange similar to Bybit, but you don't need KYC for Bitflex. And also right now, there is still that exclusive Apple Watch Series 9 giveaway happening over at Bitflex, which has been extended. Only if you use the link down below this video, you can actually enter into this giveaway if you're going to be trading crypto. And so once again, if you're trading crypto anyway, or if you're preparing to take the next trade, you might as well get set up or ready to go on one of those exchanges using those links if you want to get those extra bonuses. And if we're zooming further into the short-term Bitcoin chart, right now we can see pretty much a perfect bounce from this area of support, which is sitting in between around 65,500 to 66,000. And obviously over the last one day, we broke below this short-term area of support, which was previous resistance and is once again resistance, which is sitting in between around 68,500 to 70,000, once again now acting as resistance. And if we see a breakout above 70,000, then in that case, I would expect more resistance up here in between around 73 to 74,000, which was exactly my short-term price target a few days ago, and that's exactly where the price turned around at. And now let's just say if we see another day with a very small Bitcoin ETF inflows, or even a day where we're seeing outflows from the Bitcoin ETFs, net outflows, then in that case, we could end up seeing a bit more of a short-term pullback. And in that scenario, if we actually break back below around 65,500, then in that case, our next important short-term support is this price range sitting in between around 61,000 to 62,000. But down there, there's a lot of people interested in buying Bitcoin. And so those are the important levels to pay attention to in the short term. And speaking of the short term, just on the 1 hour Bitcoin chart, we're actually seeing a new bullish divergence pattern. And now keep in mind the difference between the different timeframes. Once again, it's important to understand that this is all looking at different timeframes. And so just because we have a bullish divergence on one chart and a bearish divergence on another chart, those do not contradict each other because they're on two different timeframes. And basically, the main difference between the different timeframes is the larger the time frame, the more significant the pattern or signal, and usually the larger the moves and the longer they take to play out. Whereas on smaller time frames, they're slightly less significant, and usually they play out much faster with smaller moves in the price. And so, for example, potentially over the coming day or so, we could end up perhaps seeing this short-term bullish divergence play out just like that, for example, because once again, a bullish divergence usually plays out in the form of either choppy sideways price action or a slight bullish relief. But if we're zooming out on the 8-hour time frame, if that short-term bullish divergence actually plays out, then on the 8-hour time frame, it would honestly look something like that. And remember, all of this is currently occurring within a much larger bullish trend. So we're only taking a bit of a short-term pause from a larger bullish trend. And if we're taking a look at the Bitcoin liquidation heat map, we can see that just recently we actually took out some liquidity to the downside, and we still have a little bit more liquidity to the downside, which is sitting at around 65,000 approximately. But as of right now, we actually have a massive amount of liquidity building to the upside, which is starting at pretty much exactly 74,000 and going up towards nearly 76,000. And if we're taking a look at the Ethereum chart on the weekly time frame, right now we're potentially retesting that important previous area of resistance, which should now act as new support, sitting in between 3.4 to 3.5k. But obviously, just like Bitcoin on the larger timeframes, and as I've been saying for months and months now on the channel, and for Bitcoin over a year now on the channel, I'm still extremely bullish on the larger trend at play when we're looking at the weekly timeframe, for example. But obviously, during the larger bullish trend, we can see short-term pullbacks and short-term bearish price action here and there, so just keep that in mind. And if we're zooming into the daily time frame, right now we're still technically within a bullish trend, forming higher lows and higher highs. We've not yet broken the bullish price structure, but as I warned in my last video, we're actually losing bullish momentum in the short term, with the MACD losing momentum and heading towards a bearish cross, which is now happening. And now technically this still needs to be confirmed with a daily candle close, but with that being said, we are currently seeing a new bearish cross in the MACD, which is technically a short-term bearish signal, telling us that we've basically lost a lot of that bullish momentum right now, and we're even seeing a little bit of short-term bearish momentum. And in case you're wondering about my trading strategy, as of right now, I am still in that Ethereum long position that I entered all the way back down here with my stop loss already sitting in massive profits. So it's basically impossible for me to get wrecked on that position because I'm already sitting in massive profits with my stop loss already in massive profits. And so what that means is even in the worst case scenario, if we crash to the downside right now, that stop loss would exit me automatically out of the trade in massive profits. And in the best case scenario, let's just say if we bounce right now and continue further to the upside, then that trade continues making more money. So either way, honestly, it's a win-win with that trade that I actually shared here on the channel all the way back down here. And so that is why it is important to subscribe to this channel with notifications turned on so that you don't miss out on these trading opportunities that I share often here in these videos. And in the meantime, once again, you need an exchange ready to trade on. And if you use the links down below this video to those exchanges, you can get those extra deposit bonuses, but only if you use those links down below this video. And if we're taking a look at the short-term price action, looking at the 4-hour time frame, obviously over the last one day, we broke below this area of support, which is currently acting as new resistance, sitting in between around 3750 to 3.8k. And I said in my last video that if we break back below this area right here, we could likely see a drop down towards around 3550, which is pretty much exactly what has happened as expected. And right now, that is the area of support to pay attention to, just above 3,500 give or take, and below 3,500 in a more bearish scenario, we have a lot more support down here, which is sitting in between 3.3k to 3,350. And remember, on the weekly time frame, we have this significant area of support right here, which was previous resistance, sitting in between 3.4k to 3.5k. And as for short-term resistance, once again, we have that area of resistance that I just mentioned. And in a more bullish scenario, if we break out back above that area, then in that case, we have this area of resistance in between around 3950 to 4000, and this level of resistance at around 4.1k. And if we're taking a look at the price of Solana on the weekly time frame, while the rest of the crypto market is pulling back, Solana is breaking out further to the upside, which is something that I've been talking about over and over again here on the channel. Because obviously just recently we saw that breakout above this important area of resistance, which was sitting in between 120 to 140. And I actually said a few days ago and over the last couple of weeks that Solana is basically lagging Ethereum, because this Ethereum breakout already happened around a couple weeks ago now, and this Solana breakout is only just happening. So like I said, over the last 1 week or so, Solana is basically lagging Ethereum, which is essentially why we're pumping right now, because this is essentially the pump that Ethereum saw roughly around a week ago. And so obviously, if you've been watching my videos and you took advantage of this breakout on Solana, congratulations, you should be making a lot of money right now. And the next major level of resistance for Solana on the larger timeframes is the old all-time high, which is sitting at around 250 to 260. And as for possible short-term resistance, we could actually find a bit of short-term resistance right around here at around $200. So just keep that in mind here in the short term. But overall, just like Bitcoin and Ethereum, we're still within a much larger bullish trend, forming significant higher lows and higher highs, despite what happens on smaller timeframes. And once again, if you want to trade these moves, check out those links down below this video. And if you actually want to know how to take those trades, whether we're bullish or bearish or chopping around sideways, then make sure to watch these videos popping up right here on your screen. The video in the top left shows you how you can profit from bullish or bearish price action using long positions or short positions. And the video in the bottom left shows you how you can easily profit from choppy sideways price action. But anyway, that is everything that I have to say for today. I really hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next video.